victory. It wasn't long before Marie was awakened in the moonlight by a strange rumbling that seemed to come from one corner of her room. It was as though pebbles were being thrown and rolled about, and at the same time she heard the nastiest whistling and squeaking. "Oh dear, the mice are here again," Marie cried out in fright. She tried to call her mother, but she couldn't make a sound or stir a muscle. And then she saw the king of the mice squeeze through a hole in the wall. With flashing eyes and crowns, he scurried across the floor and jumped up on the little table beside Marie's bed. "Hee hee hee," piped the king of the mice. "Give me your sugar balls, give me your marzipan, or I'll bite your Nutcracker to pieces." And then, gnashing his teeth most abominably, he slipped into a hole in the wall. Marie was so frightened by the gruesome apparition that she was very pale the next morning and could hardly say a word. 100 times she was about to tell her mother or Louise, or at least Fritz, what had happened, but then she thought, will anyone believe me? Won't they just laugh at me? Still, it was plain to her that to save Nutcracker, she would have to sacrifice her sugar balls and marzipan. So that night, she put her whole supply of these delicacies at the foot of the toy cabinet. Next morning, her mother said, "I can't understand how all those mice could get into our living room. Look, my poor Marie, they've eaten up all your sweets." And so they had. The gluttonous king of the mice hadn't found the marzipan to his liking, but had gnawed at the edges with his sharp teeth, so it had to be thrown away. Marie didn't mind about the candy. Actually, she was delighted, for she thought she had saved Nutcracker. So imagine how she felt that night when she heard the squeaking and squealing close to her ears. The king of the mice was back again. His eyes flashed even more dangerously than the night before, and he whistled even more disgustingly between his teeth. "Give me your sugar dolls, or I'll bite your Nutcracker to pieces." And with that, the horrid king of the mice scurried away. Marie was miserable. Next morning, she went to her cupboard and looked sadly at her sugar dolls. And she had good reason to be sad, for you can't imagine, attentive reader, what sweet little figures all carved and molded from sugar little Marie Stahlbaum owned. There was a handsome shepherd with his shepherdess tending a flock of milk-white sheep, while his dear little dog capered around them. There were 2 postmen striding along with letters in their hands, and there were 4 of the prettiest couples, sprucely dressed young gentlemen and daintily dressed young ladies, swinging in a Russian swing. There were some dancers, and behind them William Tell and the Maid of Orleans, who didn't mean much to Marie, but in the far corner stood a red-cheeked child, Marie's favorite. The tears came to Marie's eyes. "Oh," she cried, turning to Nutcracker, "dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, I'll do anything I can to save you, but it's very hard." Nutcracker looked so pathetic that Marie, who seemed to see the Mouse King's 7 mouths open wide, ready to gobble the poor boy up, decided to sacrifice every one of her sugar dolls. So that night, she set them all in front of the toy cabinet, as she had her sweets the night before. She kissed the shepherd and shepherdess and the lambs, and last of all the red-cheeked child. But she put the child in the last row. William Tell and the Maid of Orleans were up front. "This is dreadful," cried Mrs. Stahlbaum the next morning. "There must be some horrid big mouse living in the toy cabinet, because all of poor Marie's sugar dolls have been nibbled and bitten." Marie couldn't hold back her tears, but she soon smiled again, for she thought, what does it matter since Nutcracker is saved? That evening, so what's happening? Marie is sacrificing her precious candies and dolls and some of her toys to save Nutcracker's life, right?
Yeah, and then so she keeps being sad, then she's getting happy again because she realizes Nutcracker's still alive.
Right. Okay.
But that night.
That evening, Mrs. Stahlbaum was telling the judge about the mischief a mouse had done in the children's toy cabinet. The doctor blurted out, "It's really too bad. We can't get rid of that wretched mouse. It's eating up all Marie's candy." "I've got it," Fritz broke in. "The baker downstairs has an excellent gray legation secretary. I'll bring him up here, and he'll soon bite the mouse's head off, even if it's Madame Mouserink herself, or her son, the king of the mice." "Won't that be lovely?" said Mrs. Stahlbaum, laughing. "And he'll prowl around on the chairs and tables and knock all the cups and glasses over and do all sorts of damage." "So do you think Mrs. Stahlbaum likes the idea of having a cat?" No. "Not at all," said Fritz. "The baker's legation secretary is as clever as they make them. I wish I could walk on the crest of the roof the way he does." "Please, no cats in the house at night," begged Louise, who couldn't abide cats. "Actually," said the doctor, "Fritz is right, but we could set a trap instead. Haven't we got one?" "Godfather Drosselmeyer will make us one," cried Fritz. "He invented them." All laughed, and when Mrs. Stahlbaum informed them that there was none in the house, the judge said he had several, and within the hour he had an excellent mousetrap brought from his own home. Fritz and Marie had their heads full of the judge's story about the hard nut when Dora, the cook, was browning the fat. Marie trembled, and her mind filled with the story and its marvels. She said to Dora, whom she had known for years, "Oh, your Majesty, beware of Madame Mouserink and her family." Fritz drew his sword and cried, "Let them come. I'll give them more than they bargained for." But all remained quiet under the stove and on top of it. As the judge was fastening the fat to a thin wire and ever so quietly putting the trap down next to the toy cabinet, Fritz cried out, "Take care, Godfather Clockmaker, that the Mouse King doesn't play some trick on you." Oh, what a time Marie had that night. Something ice cold scurried about on her arm. Something rough and disgusting lay down on her cheek and piped and squeaked in her ear. The horrid king of the mice sat down on her shoulder. Blood-red foam poured from all 7 of his mouths, and gnashed and grinding his teeth, he piped and squeaked in her ear. "Hiss, hiss! Stay away from that house. Mustn't get caught, oh precious mouse. You'll have to miss the feast. Give us your picture books, give us your little dresses, or you'll have no peace." But are they taking a piece of her happiness?
No.
You know, like a piece of pie, Nutcracker will be eaten alive. Hee hee pee pee. Squeak! That's how it ends.
That's how the whole book ends.
No. Yeah.
Squeak!
No, just a little song, the little thing that the mouse says. Marie was beside herself with anguish. And the next morning she was pale and distraught when her mother said, "That nasty mouse hasn't been caught." But believing that Marie was upset about her sweets and afraid of the mouse, her mother added, "Don't worry, child. We'll get rid of that wicked mouse. If the traps don't help, Fritz can bring in his gray legation secretary." No sooner was Marie alone in the parlor than she went to the toy cabinet and, sobbing, said to Nutcracker, "Oh, dear Mr. Drosselmeyer, what can I do for you? Poor unhappy child that I am. If I give that horrid Mouse King all my picture books and even the beautiful dress the Christ child brought me, he'll just keep asking for more. I won't have anything left, and instead And instead of you, he'll want to bite me to pieces. Oh, poor me, what shall I do? Do you see what's happening here? The Mouse King keeps asking for more and more and more and more. Will it ever stop? No, it seems to keep going. While thus weeping and lamenting, Marie noticed a big blood stain on Nutcracker's neck. It had been there since the eventful night. Now that she knew that her Nutcracker was really young Drosselmeyer, the judge's nephew, she no longer carried him about in her arms and had given up kissing and fondling him. Indeed, she felt rather shy about touching him altogether. Today, however, she took him carefully out of the cabinet and began to rub off the blood stain with her handkerchief. Imagine how she felt when she suddenly noticed that Nutcracker was growing warmer in her hand and starting to move. Quickly, she put him back on his shelf, and then his lips stirred, and he said in a strained whisper, "Oh, dear Mistress Stahlbaum, honored friend, I already owe you so much. You mustn't sacrifice your picture books or your little Christmas dresses on my account. Just get me a sword. A sword is all I need. I can manage the rest," even if he... At that, his words ebbed away, and his eyes, which had been alive with the most fervid melancholy, became fixed and dead. Marie felt no fear. On the contrary, she danced for joy, for now she knew a way of saving Nutcracker without any more painful sacrifices. Remember me saying she was sacrificing things. But where was she to find the little fellow a sword? She decided to ask Fritz for advice, and that evening, when their parents had gone out and the two children were sitting by themselves beside the glass cabinet in the living room, she told him the whole story of Nutcracker and the King of the Mice and explained what was needed to save Nutcracker. What upset Fritz the most was hearing from Marie's lips that his hussars had given such a poor account of themselves in the battle. He asked her in dead earnest if that was really true, and when she gave him her word that it was, he went straight to the cabinet and treated his hussars to a stirring harangue. To punish them for their cowardice, he cut the insignia off their caps one by one and forbade their bands to play the Hussars' March for exactly 1 year. After thus discharging his disciplinary duties, he finally turned to Marie. "I can get Nutcracker a sword," he said, because only yesterday I pensioned off an old colonel of the cuirassiers. He won't be needing his fine sharp sword anymore." The colonel in question was living on his pension in the hindmost corner of the third shelf. Fritz took him out, relieving him of his silver saber, and slung it around Nutcracker's waist. The next night, fear and dread kept Marie awake. At the stroke of 12, she seemed to hear strange sounds and clanging and a crashing in the parlor, and then suddenly, squeak! "The Mouse King! The Mouse King!" cried Marie. Stricken with horror, she jumped out of bed. All was still, but soon she heard a soft knocking at the door and a faint little voice. "Esteemed Mistress Stahlbaum, open the door and have no fear. I bring good news." Recognizing young Drosselmeyer's voice, Marie threw on her dressing gown and opened the door. There stood Nutcracker, holding the bloody sword in his right hand and a wax candle in his left. The moment he saw Marie, he went down on his knee and said, "You alone, dear lady, gave me the courage and strength to fight the insolent varlet who dared to defy you. The treacherous King of the Mice has been vanquished and lies writhing in his blood. Deign, dear lady, to accept these tokens of victory from the hand of one who will be your true and faithful knight until death." With that, Nutcracker adroitly stripped off the Mouse King's 7 golden crowns, which he had been wearing on his left arm, and handed them to Marie, who accepted them with delight. Then Nutcracker rose to his feet and continued, "Oh, Mistress Stahlbaum, what splendid things I can show you in this hour of victory over my enemy, if you will be kind enough to follow me a little way. Come with me, I beg you, dear mistress, to the land of dolls."
What?